Hello and welcome back. In this video, we are going to add the search controller and the search routes to our API gateway. Now, the search that is related or coming from the auth service, or that needs to go to the auth service. Okay, so we need to add it to the API gateway. Now, first, let's go to our services, API, and then auth service. Now, if you scroll down where you have the get gigs method, you can see get gigs and get gig. These get gigs will be used for the search, okay, and this will be used to get the data for one particular gig. And now for these get gigs, you can see it takes in a query, okay, and then it takes in other params. You can see here it takes in the query and then it takes in other params right here. Okay, so the structure of this, to just give you an idea of how it's going to look, so it's going to, the path is going to be something like this, slash search, or rather it's going to be auth slash search slash gig, then slash, here you see we have from, okay, so probably for the first time it's going to be 0. Then what is the size? Let's say 10, okay, and then what is the type? The type is going to be forward. We already saw that. So if the user clicks the forward button, we set the type to forward. And now the part I want to talk about is this query part. Okay, so the query part, it's going to be something like this. Okay, and then we're going to set our own query. Okay, and it's going to be equal to whatever the user typed into the box. Let's say they are looking for programming. Okay, so this is going to be the query right here. Now this is the key. This could be anything. Okay, you could call this search, you could call this text, okay, but I decided that we are going to call it query. Okay, and then we are going to have other parts like delivery underscore time, let's say 3 as an example, and then we are going to have minimum price, okay, let's say 5, and maximum price 20. Okay, so from the front end, this is how the requests or the endpoints will look like. Okay, so at first, when the user types into the search box, we are going to have only this kind of query equals to whatever the user types in. And then when the user wants to filter by delivery time, we are going to append this delivery time. And then when the user wants to filter by minimum and maximum price, then we are going to append this as well. Okay, so this is how it's going to look, but now we'll need to construct this here in our controller. Okay, so go to your controllers, create the search inside auth. I'll create a file called search.ts, and then here I will export, okay, export class, I'll call this search. Okay, the first method will be the one to search a single gig. So async, I'll call this gig by ID. For now, I can take this one out, or maybe, no, I'll take it out. So gig by ID, request of type request, and then response of type response. As usual, promise of type void. Okay, so here we do const response of type Axios response equal to await auth service dot gig by, or get gig. Okay, so just get gig. Okay, and then here we pass in request.params.gig ID. Okay, if we go to auth service, here you can see it requires a gig ID. Okay, and that is what we are passing here because we are going to get it from the params when the request comes from the front end. And then here I can just res.status and then status codes .ok.json. Okay, and then here I'm going to pass message. The message is going to be response.data.message. Remember I said this data object is always going to contain your response that you're sending from your endpoint or from the service, because that is what is included in Axios response. Okay, so it's coming from Axios. And then gig, the single gig, this will be gig response.data.gig. Okay, so this is the first method. This will be used to get the data of a single gig by passing in this gig ID. Now let's add the gig, the other method to get gigs. Okay, now for this, what we are going to do is we will need to kind of construct properly the queries that we want to send. First, here I'll say const, let me get the from, size and type from request.params. Okay, and now I will say let's query. I want to construct a query. Okay, and then here this remember from what I showed you earlier. Okay, to just quickly do that again, to just give an idea. Remember that the request we want to send also to the auth service will be in this form. So I want to be able to construct this properly. Okay, so right here we are going to get our data from request.query, but I need to convert it into a key value pair inside the list or an array. So I'll say object list equal to object.entries, and I'll pass request.query. Don't worry, once we start testing, it will make much sense. And then I want to get the last index, the index of the last item in the list. So last item index, and you can get that using object list.length -1. So in JavaScript, if you want to get the index of the last item, you can just the index.length -1. Okay, and then I'll say object list dot for each object list. I will loop through the list. Okay, object list dot for each, and then I want to get the key and the value. Okay, so if you hover on this here, it says returns an array of key values of the enumerable properties of an object. So it will convert an object, okay, into a list with key values. Okay, so that is the key and the value we have right here. And then what I want to do is I will say query plus equal, and then I want to properly append them. Okay, so key equal to value. Once we start testing, they will make much sense. Okay, and then here, remember to add the next query parameter, we use the ampersand symbol. So we say ampersand and then delivery underscore time, and then we add the value, and then we use ampersand. So this is how we add the query params. And then here, what I'm going to do is I will check if the index is equal to the last item index. So I'll get the index from here. So index. So in the for each, I'm getting the key value and also the index. So I want to check if index is equal to last item index, or not, rather in this case, not equal to. So if the index in the loop is not equal to the last item index, then we want to append we want to add this ampersand symbol. Okay, so here it's going to be, we add the ampersand symbol. But if they are both equal, we just add an empty string. Okay, so once it loops through the array, it checks if the index, the current index, is equal to the last index. If it is not, if they are not equal, then it will add this ampersand and then append the query params, and then it will go through the loop again. It will check if they are not equal, it adds this ampersand, and then here you say mean price equals to 5. Okay, and max price equal to 20. And now once it gets to the last index, then it's not going to add this ampersand symbol. Right now we're just using this to construct the query. Okay, Now what we need to do is here I'll call get gigs, and this get gigs, it expects a query of type string and this other params. So here is going to be query, and then here I can add from, size, and then type. Okay, so let me close this right here. And here for us, the data will be message. Then I need the total. It's going to be response.data.total. And then gigs. Okay, gigs is going to be response data gigs. Okay, this might not really make any sense, but once we test, you really understand what it actually does. So here I'm just reconstructing the queries that I want to send to the auth service. Okay, that is what I'm just doing here. It's going to come from the front end in a different format, and then here I'm reconstructing it to the format I already showed you so that we can send it to the auth service. Now let us go ahead and add the routes. Okay, so go to route folder. Here I'll call this search.ts. Now to just quickly fix this, copy one of these here, paste. This will be called search routes. Okay, and then we are going to need two routes. We already seen that before. So this is going to be auth/search gig from, size, and type. Okay, and then for the class I'll call this search right here. So this is going to be search, and then let's import. I don't need this health anymore, and it's going to be search.prototype.gigs, and then let me duplicate. This second one is just going to be gig and then gig ID. So it's going to be prototype.gig by ID. Okay, so this is the route. Now we can go ahead and use this. Okay, so we are going to use it in our routes folder. I'll do the same thing here. Okay, and then import route. Okay, so with this now we've added the search feature. In the next video we are going to test this out.